Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. I just want to get an idea, how many of you guys are actually developers? Okay. How many of you have a design team within your organisation? Okay, cool. And how many of you work with external vendors, design vendors that supply design to your org? Okay, so most of you know it's pretty tricky getting your designers to actually integrate with your development team. Designers, we seem to think we're special snowflakes. So as Matt said, I'm Sam Thiebridge. I've come over from Sydney to talk to you today about how you can get your designers to use your dev tools and basically integrate better with your team. So first of all, I'm just going to talk quickly about what user experience design actually is. Then I'm going to talk about the challenges that we face within Atlassian and challenges that you might face as well in your organisation. I'm going to go through 5 simple steps to solve them. And then I'm going to have a look back because our design process at Atlassian is still evolving. So I'll talk to you about a few processes we're still refining. So first of all, let's have a look at what happens when you let software engineers design interfaces. It's nice. So Mike this morning showed you a preview of the new project management UI in JIRA, which is something we're really excited about. I'm going to actually use that as a bit of a case study today. But first of all, I want to talk about why user experience is so important. So first of all, what is user experience? It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. We sometimes refer to it as UX. It's not a new word for web designer. So UX is making things simple, easy, and pleasurable to use. And we're not just talking about software interfaces, we're talking about everything, service design, product design, everything. So I needed to do all of these things, but I wanted to feel like this. And apparently software engineers prefer this. So within user experience, there are roughly 5 core component disciplines. There's information architecture, HCI and cognitive psychology, user research and validation, interaction design, and then visual design, which we jokingly refer to as the lipstick on the pig. So information architecture is to do things like taxonomies, nomenclature, basically funneling information into the right containers where our users can find it. Cognitive psychology is, how our users perceive, how they learn, how they remember. User research and validation is making sure our interfaces work. Interaction design and visual design is what I'm going to focus on mostly today because that's the core of what we do at Atlassian. So interaction design is concerned with enabling user behaviour within a specific context. For example, a screen or a set of subtasks within a screen. Interaction design it's not just about form controls or giant submit buttons. It's about providing the easiest and most logical way for a user to complete a task. So if you think about the form control element, the radio button or the checkbox as being an atomic element of a component, such as a login module, and then that login module is part of a bigger choreography, which may be, say, a framework like a shopping cart. So it's marketing's job to get someone to want to buy something, and it's the interaction designer's job to get the user to complete that purchase as frictionless as possible. So to do this, we employ a whole box of tricks based on what we know about human-computer interaction. So we use a vast mental library of known interaction patterns. We don't reinvent the wheel. We know what people understand and what they've learnt. So we try to keep things as simple as possible so people don't have to relearn. It's about anticipating how the user expects things to work. It's about getting them to not be scared to hit the submit button. And it's empowering them to complete a task and also providing some error recovery and a safety net in case they do something they didn't mean to do. Make them feel confident that they can undo it. And the less new stuff the user is faced with, the better. But sometimes with Atlassian Tools, we do have quite complicated interactions. So we need to make it simple, discoverable, and learnable. So if we're talking about interaction design, we're not talking about colours or shapes or anything at this point. We're just working out how we can get you from point A to point B. And then how those patterns look is then up to the visual designer. So visual design is about alignment, spacing, dynamics, visual hierarchy, where we want people to look first, where we want them to look last. It's about colour, fonts, iconography. We have try to encourage people to use less icons if they can. Don't make it icon salad. And then gradients, rounded corners, drop shadows, and all the things that developers really hate. And then if we've done our job properly, we've come up with something that's fairly invisible and looks like it's just come off a machine and doesn't look like it's been touched by human hands. And if it's invisible design, what that means is that the user is more focused on the task they need to complete and less worried about what it looks like. So this is an example of what we end up with at the end of the visual design process. So at Atlassian, what are our challenges? We've got a few different ones, which you probably have as well. So we've got design challenges, which is our day-to-day, the granular decisions we make about fonts, icon sizes, etc. We've got practical challenges which relate to the physical way we do our job, including things like geography. We have methodological challenges, which pertain to the shifting project management styles in software development. And finally, we have communication problems, which are as much about the different mindsets of the groups that play within Atlassian as it is about note-taking and descriptive emails, etc. That's a trick question because it's always wingdings. So the design challenges that we have, the first one is the unique nature of our users. I've come from a consumer front-end web area, so I was designing for grandmothers and grandfathers. Here I'm designing for the brainiest people on the planet. So because our users are so much more tech-savvy than the average user, it's very easy for us to allow unnecessary complexity to slip in. What we need to do at Atlassian is we need to try to avoid that and keep things simple. Our next challenge is that we're pulling 5 products into line visually, and all of our products have a different visual heritage. They all came from a different place. We're aiming for visual parity while remaining faithful to the aims of each product. So over in JIRA, it's so fully featured and complex, but we don't want to shoehorn the features in JIRA back into Confluence where they're not necessary. But they still need to look like they're part of the same family. Next challenge is rolling visual changes out from one product to the next. We've had this page chrome, it's like the rounded corner thing in JIRA for quite a while now, since 4.1, and it's only just going into Confluence 4.0, I think. What we need to do is we change it in one product and then we need to go and sell it to the product manager of another to try and get it added to their backlog. And then we have to communicate our pattern usage. So here, for example, you can see that we've actually got 2 different kinds of tabs. So those are the kinds of things that our designers need to be aware of and communicate and say, all right, Confluence, you need to be like JIRA, or JIRA, you need to be like Confluence. Our practical challenges are probably the same as anywhere. We don't work in a centralised design team. Because our products are so complicated, we need each designer to work just on their own product and know it like the back of their hand. But unfortunately, that means we need to get together physically to communicate all of those things like new patterns, etc. We work in different floors of different buildings because at Atlassian we're continually outgrowing our space. We work across time zones, which is really, really tricky. And I think it's actually trickier from this side of the Pacific than it is from Sydney, because you've had a full business day while Sydney's asleep. So we're getting to work and having breakfast and ready to start our day. And in San Francisco, they're starting to knock off. And of course, we work across continents. So I have to walk across Sussex Street and nearly get hit by cars to get really good coffee. But my PM has to cross the ocean to get good coffee. Actually, I'm joking, because you guys got better at everything else. The methodological challenge is my favourite because all design and development are facing this around the world. Back in the bad old days of Web 1.0, design used to happen up front, and we had a lot of power. The discovery and the scoping and the conceptual phases of a project could last anywhere from 3 months to a year. And I don't know if you guys remember when websites cost $2 million. Yeah. I love those days. Anyway, but the developers could start working on functionality, but only until they had a signed-off function spec in their hands. And quite often, they would hold off until designs were actually finally approved. So because we've got this legacy waterfall methodology, we're finding it difficult to separate the concept of thinking time from the concept of continuous iteration. We've got two choices. So we can push back and we can say, no, you're not starting until I have finished this entire, this entire stack of designs. Or we can start doing it in an evolutionary way, which you've seen with JIRA 4.1, now to JIRA 4.4. This is all, it's been an evolutionary process. We couldn't just do it all in one go. The most important thing is don't let your design team work separately from your developers. Get them involved and using your tools as soon as you possibly can. In the past, designers would use their own desktop wireframing applications, online request trackers, online collaboration tools, and online asset management systems, and generally those systems didn't actually talk to each other. We would use something like Visio or OmniGraffle or something, and then we would have to export to some kind of readable format like a PDF. If a client wanted changes or a customer wanted changes, they would need to email us back, we'd change our Visio file, spit out another PDF, and then send it out. Then once we get to dev, our dev teams will be using a wiki and an issues tracker, in most cases Confluence and JIRA. So it doesn't make any sense for design to be using these first four tools when we could start just using the developer tools. When I first got to Atlassian, I said, okay, so I understand what we're using for issues tracking, but what is design using? Are we using Basecamp? Are we using, RT by Best Practical? And they said, we're using JIRA. And I thought, that makes so much sense. So here's how we do it. We have 5 steps, basically. Brain dump to brief, which is, could start with a JIRA.com issue or a blog post. Then we go from a brief to a wireframe. Again, we use Confluence for this. Wireframes to design, we actually do use Adobe software. And design to implementation, that's when we start to really integrate with the actual JIRA project. And then implementation to validation, and then we start to get into maintenance mode where we're actually using JIRA like the devs are. So let's start with the brain dump to brief. I'm going to talk about our internal name for the project management UI you saw this morning was actually JIRA Ignite. And so I'll talk you quickly through that. The problem was that we knew the majority of you guys weren't spending your days in and around the JIRA admin UI. And most of you told us that you were configuring parts of JIRA once and then not coming back for weeks or months and then having to relearn those same steps. And it was a massive problem with schemes because not everyone was reconfiguring schemes, but they were still a first-class UI element. And every time you wanted to add an issue type, you had to remember that you had to go into schemes, you had to add an issue type. And it was very, very confusing. And we knew that it was scaring enough people off that we had to make it more simple. Another way we start with new feature requests or feature designs is JIRA.com issues. So here, one of you guys wanted the ability to set the priority of outgoing emails. Now that sounds like a developer specific bug, but it's actually it does require a UX person to figure out how to reconfigure a form in the admin. Here, this seems highly technical. They just wanted so a project could update versions without having to be an admin. Again, that's something we need to think about from a user experience point of view. How can we get that task completed easily? But if we look at the JIRA Ignite project, this started off as a massive brain dump into Confluence. We started off with the background, we had our objectives, we talked about the project scope, and this document grew over time. So we have our personas. We've invented this persona Dan, who basically he's who we have in mind when we're coming up with our stories and our epics. We talk about the challenges. We put all our research in here, so our customer interviews are all linked to from this one massive page. So, this guy wants more granular reporting, etc. We put support metrics, every bit of information that is going to affect the design or the development of this project goes into this site. And the best thing about that is if you're a new staff member, you can get up to speed really, really quickly. The next best part, and this is where we're talking about working from one side of the Pacific to the other, and even to, with Amsterdam, is everybody in this company was involved in that admin UI project. So people started to provide feedback on this page. And this is where things that we hadn't previously thought about came up. So, we had John Sloat. Are you guys planning on measuring number of clicks between actions via Google? As you flesh out features like the Gmail priority inbox, let us know where marketing can fit in. Christina over in San Francisco, do you have anything listed to measure with search reporting? I mean, these are things that we may not have thought of at the time. Back in Sydney, we had JT being, it'd be great to measure user and customer confidence for people who are setting up projects over time. So people on both sides, in both parts of the office, were having this constant conversation, and everyone had input. We also do things like when we do paper prototyping, we photograph that, we stick it up on Confluence. Any whiteboard scribbles also get photographed and put on Confluence. Don't throw anything out, everything's valuable. Then we use Gliffy. I don't know how many of you guys actually have Gliffy installed, but it's a plugin that we use very, very heavily at Atlassian to do diagramming and setting up our schematics, our mental models and that sort of thing. So here's how we used it for JIRA Ignite project. So you just go into your Confluence page, you just add a Gliffy diagram, and then you can just go to town. So this is how we ended up figuring out how everything connected together in that admin UI. And the best part about this is that people over in San Francisco can be editing this, and then we can get to work, on Monday morning and find out that, people have made changes to it. And it's really highly collaborative. If you don't have Gliffy installed, I suggest you trial it. So then what you do is you just save that and it just deploys it to the Confluence page. And then you can come back and edit that as many times as you like. And you can also do other cool things, like you can duplicate a page and then you have a backup of the original, and so you can edit the new page and edit the diagram in there. And don't forget to share. I don't know how many of you guys were in John's talk earlier, but we've got the new share feature on Confluence now. I'm just sending this to myself just so that to show you, but make sure you use the share functionality. It's only fairly new, but we're all using it all the time. So you can send people to look at your new stuff. So that's how we get from the brain dump to the brief. So we've got a JIRA.com issue or a blog post or customer interviews, like comments from you guys where you say, this sucks, fix it. Whiteboard scroll, don't throw anything away, photograph everything and upload it. You've all got Android phones. I'm sure you can do it. And then we go from the brief to the wireframes, and we do this using Balsamic. Again, it's another plugin for Confluence. So here, when we were doing the JIRA Ignite project, you just insert a UI mockup. And this is when people start to see real work happening and they see their vision start to come to life. And it doesn't look anywhere near final, which is the best thing about Balsamic, because it doesn't look like a design yet, and people can kind of separate how it looks from what it's supposed to do. And everybody in our company uses this. It's not just restricted to designers or product managers. Even our developers use this to sketch out their FedEx ideas or their 20% projects. And the best part about this, again, like Gliffy, is that Balsamic file is a living document and anyone can edit it, which means that after this is done, my project manager can come along and he can change one thing without having to email me and then wait 24 hours to see it updated. So from brief to wireframes, we wireframe straight into Confluence using Balsamic. They're living and breathing documents. Anyone can edit them. And then we go from wireframes to design. And this is where we actually get out of Atlassian's software, and we actually do have to use MS Paint. Once we've done that, we get it straight back into Confluence, and this is where we use the composition plugin. And if you guys haven't got this installed, this is how we simulate interactivity, like we basically fake up prototyping. So we can have giant cursors to show, click here and do this and open this menu and this does this. It means anyone can do this without having to know a single bit of coding. So this is the composition plugin. It's from Customware. It's free. If you don't have it, go get it from the plugin exchange. It is my favourite thing ever. The other thing about it is you don't have to then scroll a 20-kilometre page to get your comments in. You can just have this long and comments start straight under it. Another thing we use Confluence for is to host our style guide. So what this does is this empowers our developers who maybe not working in interface updates very often. They can come here and make sure that all of their styles conform to our documents. So this is constantly being updated. And if you don't have one of these, Confluence is a great place to store it. My favourite thing that we do is at Atlassian Design, we're actually checking in files into repositories. In Studio, I use Subversion, and in Fisher, they're using Mercurial, but I think we'll probably all end up on Mercurial at some point. So here's an example. This is a working prototype I built basically to prove a concept for header navigation for the new Studio header. So you're just going to your project, view your source, locate your file, and it's version controlled, so I can go back to old versions if I need to. So click on your file, view the source, check out the raw, and then you want to, and so here, this is just a JavaScript image hack that I did to just prove this concept that this menu was going to work. And then you just copy that link straight into a Confluence page. And what that does is that means I can share this page again, and I can get this in front of people that maybe aren't as tech savvy and can't browse to things via fisheye. So we treat it exactly like code. So just link this, stick it in a web link, and then I can actually use this as part of my internal testing. I can send that off to people in HR and say, just look at this, does this work for you? And just, it saves us heaps of time. And there we go. We're also checking in raw artwork files into our repos. We're actually putting our Photoshop files, our Illustrator files, Fireworks files checking them into a repository, which means we can retain version controlling. And it means that the developers can put their hands on our files really easily. They don't have to ask us for stuff. They don't have to go to a file server anywhere. Everything's there. So you can download the Photoshop file if you like. Or we can put up, web-ready images so that we can show people more easily. So here's an early example of the admin UI. That's JDog, which is up. I think there's a competition to have the worst colours in the header. So from wireframes to design, we bring different states of static designs to life using Confluence. We check in interactive prototypes. We browse to those files and link HTML in Confluence. And we restore version-controlled raw artwork files in a central repo. Then we go from design to implementation. So this is where we treat JIRA exactly like a design ticketing system. So what we do is we just create a new, eventually. Okay, so you create a new issue. And basically you treat it exactly like a bug. So you just I've got a new feature, I'm going to, I require a new logo. It's basically like creating a design ticket, and then the designer can then go and add that logo to that design ticket. We can also link those issues that we created back into our Confluence page. So I don't know if you guys have used this feature of just inserting issues straight into Confluence. What we do with this is we kind of manage our backlog, and we put priorities in and we present those back to our team leads and that sort of thing. This is what I'm working on, here are my issues. Just means they can go there very quickly, especially particularly for me, because I tend to work on more than one product. Because I'm on Studio, I might help out on Confluence or JIRA at times. So my backlog is not going to be product specific. So then you just add that and go straight there. We also love Greenhopper in design. There's huge advantages to be gained by using this to actually manage your design resources. So I'll just first of all talk about the benefits of designing in Agile. I know a lot of designers are struggling with this because of what I was saying before about the waterfall legacy, where we used to have all the power. Basically, what we can do if we design properly in Agile, assuming our devs are developing properly in Agile, We can respond to evolving needs. We can change things on the fly. We've got more latitude to change our mind. We're not married to things necessarily. Like, we can actually sort of go, you can get over our egos and go, yep, fine, that's better, I'll do it this way. We can achieve refinement through evolutionary design. Again, you saw that this morning with JIRA 4.4. It's looking, you can see where the origins were in 4.1, but we're really starting to get to a point we're getting to this end goal that we've had in our mind for a long time. We can be faithful to the original vision, but with continuous ideation. So again, we've got kind of a goal in mind, and we know we're getting there, but we've probably got maybe 2 versions to go. To do that, you need to trust your team to think on their feet. As designers, quite often we don't like letting software engineers make design decisions, but unfortunately, in this environment, we have to. So designers need to get over themselves. So here's how we do it. So you're here, your development sprint is here, you're the orange guy. So we've got 2 streams. We still have our streams separate. We've got a separate design stream. So during the implementation phase, we want to work 1 iteration ahead of you guys. So we're designing for the next sprint. We should be doing our research and our scoping in the sprint before that. And then we're doing our validation in the sprint after. And then we just get into maintenance mode, and same as you guys. So we use design resource management using Greenhopper. We can do this in 2 ways. We use cards to manage the backlog in the same way that you guys do, but we can do it. We can either have a separate design project in JIRA. So if your designers are more comfortable, like still keeping their own little silo, they can still use this but have a design project. Or we can do separate design subtasks within a development project, and that's how I prefer to work. We can also use filters to isolate design from the dev stream. So if you've got, I have a project that might have, 400 bugs, but only 3 of them are mine, I can filter that so it just doesn't scare me as much. The most important thing is don't pollute the burn down chart and scare your team lead by creating design projects that go over a whole iteration or maybe 2 iterations. What you want to do is you want to break things down into the smallest possible bite-sized piece of work so that you can actually start moving things from the to-do to the in-progress and to done, and make that bar look more green. So here's how we use filters. I don't know if you guys have used this before. You probably have. I was impressed. So just create a new one, call it design. Select your users. I just selected myself for this one. Save it and apply, and then what happens is I'm only going to see the jobs that I'm concerned with. Then I can go back and I can see that as well in the planning board. It's a way that if design does want to feel special, they can. And then of course I can go back and look at everybody's stuff and see how we're tracking. So from design to implementation, get your designers to use JIRA instead of whatever ticketing system that they think they need to use. They don't need to use it. Then get design to work as part of the development triage system, get them start logging UI bugs as early as possible, and get them start actually responding to those bugs as well. And of course, do your project management, like design resources in Agile. And then the 5th step is implementation to validation. What we then do is we do a lot of internal testing. And at Atlassian, we're kind of lucky because our co-workers are exactly like our customers. We can get feedback from our someone in the elevator, getting a coffee downstairs in the Corn Exchange in Sydney. Just get as many people to get as many eyes on that as possible. We do design blitz testing, for example, when I was recently designing the new studio header, which I think you'll see in the next release. I put it up and opened it up to the whole company. I think I ended up with something like 100 comments. So just be prepared to ignore a lot of people, I think. And then, of course, we do external testing and documentation, which is when we get you guys in front of our interfaces and we test it and get your feedback, and then we document all of that. And we're always learning, we're always getting new insights from old research. So I will still go back and look at user testing we did 3 or 4 years ago and learn new things from it. So we get internal and external feedback. And here's a good example of when we were designing JIRA 4.1. We put this in front of our internal team and said, what do you guys think of this? We think it's way better than what we had. And this is what came back. Tons of unused white space, +1, too much white space. Apparently developers hate white space. So we took it out and everyone was much happier. And if we had have released that into the wild, you guys would have complained. So these are our 5 steps. So we go from the brain dump to the brief, and we do that using Confluence and Gliffy. We go from the brief to wireframes. Again, we use Balsamic for that. Wireframes to design, we use that awesome composition plugin. I highly recommend that. Design to implementation, where we use JIRA exactly like a ticketing system. We use Greenhopper to manage our resources. And then implementation to validation, again, we use Confluence to document everything. But no process is perfect, and we're still refining our process at Atlassian. So while it's great to have requirements and time to ideate and refine and plan and eventually get stakeholder approval, there's no point being inflexible. You can't plan for everything. User feedback can often lead to changes. Sometimes there's things we just don't anticipate, and sometimes we're actually shocked at results. Shifting priorities and scope creep. I've had that in other organisations. Obviously, that never happens at Atlassian. And sometimes we find out we've missed something. In that JIRA admin UI you looked at today, I've got to somehow wedge that into Studio, and we've got our own admin, look and feel, and I've got to work out which tabs I can get rid of and which tabs will do the same thing. So we sort of discovered that at the last minute and went, hey, why didn't we think of that? Also, we find out sometimes designers sometimes do things that are a little bit crazy and they're actually technically unfeasible. Other times, ideas we had 2 years ago are now suddenly feasible. When we're seeing this a lot with CSS3 and HTML5. You saw, I don't know if you saw the Mike's talk this morning with the calendars, with dragging the calendars around. 2 years ago we just couldn't have even considered doing that, and now we can. Ideas we had years ago, we can now actually redo. We do occasionally still have communication snags during implementation. Developers get excited about getting code that works. And designers care about pixel-perfect execution. And this is an issue where I will design a 16-pixel margin and the developer will implement it at 12 pixels, and I'll raise an issue and he'll call me pedantic. And there's often a very good reason why I've made it 16 pixels, and so I'll push back and go, no, fix it. And it can get a little tense at times. I don't know if you've ever had a fight with your designer about something like that. I've had a few, not at Atlassian, of course. But this conflict of interest between design and developers, it's completely irrelevant to everybody else. The user doesn't care if you guys are fighting. The PM doesn't care if you guys are fighting. The PM wants it to ship, the user wants it to work. And the designer wants that 16-pixel margin. So how do we do it at Atlassian? I think thanks to the culture, we've got a really strong working relationship between design and development, and it's happened over a period of time. Basically, we've come to the realisation that UI bugs are not personal. No one set out to hurt anybody's feelings. Direct and personal communication is the best. I don't know if you guys have ever worked in an organisation where people write mean tweets about you. This bitch and her 16 pixels. And communicate with honesty. I make mistakes. I'll admit that I'm flawed. And as soon as you do that, quite often they'll go, okay, you can have your 16 pixels. And also flattery will get you everywhere. I don't know if you guys realise how impressed designers are by developers and what you guys do. It's actually, a lot of us did start off coding and have specialised into design. A lot of us still code. We can't do the complicated stuff that you guys do, so it is actually impressive. And I find that if you actually communicate that to the developer, they'll kind of do anything for you. And vice versa. If you tell the designer that you go, oh, that's a really awesome interface you did today. That's, they'll go, oh, okay, 12 pixels. So I've got a few resources if you want to go check it out. This is confluence.atlassian.com is what we call AUI, which is Atlassian User Interface. And this is something that we're building over time. It's actually technically a product of ours, but it's going to be pluggable pluggable UI modules that can just go straight in, which means our back-end developers can just, we just say, go off and get that message style, and they just go off and download the code and stick it straight in, which again is something that's empowering our developers on both sides of the ocean. ux.stackexchange.com. If you don't have a design department internally, but you want to learn a bit more about user experience design, that is the best resource that I have found. And second of all, programmers.stackexchange.com with the questions tag design. I've learned a hell of a lot about communicating with developers from that. So if you're struggling with your designers, maybe just passively aggressively feed them that link. Just say, read that. And if you want to turn your face into a manga, go to faceyourmanga.com. So thanks everybody for coming, and I hope that you go back to your companies and make design your bitch. Tell them they don't have to, they're not special and they can use the same tools you are. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's actually going to make their life a lot easier once they start actually rolling themselves into your process. Does anyone have any questions?
You talked about how you use the same JIRA project, or you use JIRA just like developers. Do you use a different subtask for the UX?
Yes, we do. So, well, actually, two ways.
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. Do we use a different subtasks to what the developers use?
Yep.
Sorry, yeah. We do it in a couple of ways, and it will depend on the project. If it's a large project, we will split it out and we will work separately in like a concurrent stream. But if we're actually, I guess once we get into the implementation phase, we start to use design as subtasks in that JIRA project. I prefer to actually just start straight in the JIRA project alongside the devs and just treat design as if it's a development resource that we just do different projects, different tasks.
So you follow the same iteration cycle then?
We follow the same iteration cycle. We work within the same iteration cycle, but we're kind of working one behind. So the tasks that I have in that particular sprint are going to affect development in their next sprint, if that makes sense. But we still in our our fortnightly planning meetings or our iteration planning meetings, I still will present demos of things that I'm working on that the developers will be working on maybe in 2 sprints time.
Are you in the same stand-up as?
Yes,
all the same team.
Same team, yep. So I sit with all the developers and I go to the stand-ups and I don't understand most of what they say. My eyes glaze over. But no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, we treat it exactly like a development resource. So it's, we're not special snowflakes. We're at the coalface just like the devs are.
What sort of ratio?
Oh, not high enough. I think we have about 6 design staff, so we've got our products covered. I mean, we're always looking for more. So, anybody else? I'm going to be in the decompression chamber if anyone needs to ask. Oh yes.
So I don't want to get too off subject, but you talked a little bit about, you mentioned moves and mercurial. I know that designers as well as documentation people often work with binary files.
That's right.
With Subversion, there's file locking, for example, to deal with that problem. Do you know what the plan is in the CS world?
There is apparently, and I've been talking to the Bitbucket guys about this, there's apparently binary diff algorithms. They will know more about it if they're upstairs if you want to talk to them, but basically I'm still using Subversion, so it's not really too much of an issue for me just yet. Yep.
What was the major reason that you submitted documents to Subversion rather than just keeping them in Confluence?
Basically, our aim is to work in the same workflow as dev. What we were finding was that our devs were complaining about not being able to find files if we weren't there. It's basically, if they're going to the same repo, then they can find everything and they don't have to keep coming back to us. It actually frees us up a lot. Okay, thanks everyone.